You tried to build a game studio out of Brazil with a drug lord paying you guys. He wanted 80% of the profit. He's like, no, man, that's not a boss you want to be late on. You know, like you're like crunching for a deadline. Like, hey man, if we don't make this deadline, he's literally gonna chop our feet off, and we better make this, buddy. You know, like anything. Like hell, you'd even go so far as to like go steal somebody else's source code for their game and just pass it off and just be like, we shipped it, and just like give him a CD of like Fallout. Just be like, there's our game, and just hope he doesn't notice. All right, so I like this. This is looking pretty good. It's a big enough gap, and you'd think Bitey'd be able to kind of wall jump past all this stuff, and then if we're doing Mega Man stuff, we'd be able to get up to that guy. So let's see. Yeah, I disabled links on everything here, just because, suspicious characters. You never know what somebody's gonna post. So you can just PM me the link and Twitch chat, and I'll take a look at it and throw it in there if it's appropriate. Alright, so that's looking pretty good for our test level. Good. We can mark that off of our... is there anything else that we should throw in this test level that a lot of platformers have that we just need to make sure our movement is proper on, I think we've got pretty much the basics going on here. Basic platform, some stairs. I mean, we could have some stairs going down, and see. I mean, stairs going up. I mean, we can just run up and down the stairs. It's not a big deal. Same for some of these things. Let's see. It would be nice to maybe have like a little platform or something where we can jump and teleport up to like the top of the world up here. So why don't we do that? Like copy paste this thing and throw it at 0. And we'll can we name these things? I'm sure we can name them somehow. Like add a tag to it at least. Let's see. Tags. Component tags. Yes, let's add a tag. Let's call it well, it's like a key value. I'd like a key value tag on it. We could just call it teleport dest 1. And this guy we'll call this, we'll give another tag on here. Teleport dest home. Yeah, that's probably a better idea. Instead of 1, we just do teleport dest top. Do I not get PMs when I'm streaming or something? I don't know. So we'll prevent Bitey from falling off the universe here. Teleport dust bottom. Well, yeah. Can we add, like, just throw something in here to give us an idea about where our 300 users? I mean, 300 users is really not that much. I mean, we were able to support, you know, like 5,000 users off of a single core, like, toaster 5 years ago for, like, real-time multiplayer and some basic stuff. It really depends on what you're doing. I'm assuming, yeah, Qt, C++. I mean, it really depends on your server, but 300 plus people, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a bunch of heavy physics, then that's something entirely different. Like, to give a kind of a baseline, a single thread blocking socket, I mean, 300 people that's not too much. It really depends if that single thread is locking on something. Like, if that thread has to call a database and it's sitting there for 100 milliseconds, then you're going to have a big problem. Like, even with 300 people, like, 300 people times 100 milliseconds, you know, all of a sudden you're waiting, what, 3,000, 3 seconds or something for every call or something. It can get real bad. Real quick, so a single threaded socket is really what you want, with like that single thread doing all your I/O, and then you hand it off to another thread to actually do processing, or another collection of threads to do processing. That's usually how I ran my servers, and that was pretty effective. So we'll get teleporters later. I'm just kind of screwing around with that. I think that works. So we've got our level. Excellent, Tesla. If you're going to use Qt though, usually, like, I've used Qt in the past for things that, you know, it's like got all the UI stuff. I've used it mainly for its WebKit implementations. Okay, so now what we've got to do is we got to figure out how to do I prototype in Blueprint or C++? You mean for like the actual code for things? And I've just been working in C++ for stuff. Just because the game, at least for Dashkin, a lot of the basics are kind of well known. Like, it's a high-speed platformer. You know, you run, you jump, there are platforms, there are bushes, there are all sorts of things. So it's not like I really need to do a whole heck of a lot of prototyping for the game, because, like, we kind of already know where the game is going to be. We just kind of have to write it all properly. So if I was doing prototyping, I probably wouldn't even do it in Unreal. If I was doing, like, you know, okay, I need to make like a very simple, is this concept fun sort of thing, I'd probably just do it in, like, you know, JavaScript, and you know, just make a just trash code, and, you know, just see what happens. You know, I wouldn't do that inside of Unreal unless I needed something specifically from Unreal, like I needed its physics simulation or something. Like, I need to know if, you know, swinging a bat at these boulders is fun or not. Okay, so how exactly are we going to want to How should we do this? Let's come up with a plan for how we think we should move our character around. So if we've got this little guy, and he's got these collision boxes on him, how are we gonna get him running around the level? So, like, step one, we need to acquire the actual physics boxes, which will collide against the world. So that's kind of the first thing, our movement. Steps. So we need to get the stuff that's actually going to collide. And we're going to need to know, okay, if we basically got, like, we've got a direction and a velocity. So like we're running to the left or to the right, or we're falling or something. So how do we know if we can actually go in that direction, right? Like we could like, let's say, you know, we've got a platform here, and we are this box moving to the right. What we're going to want to do is take our kind of, I guess we could take vectors off of the, you know, we're going to do a sweep test in our direction and for our step. So if we do a sweep test and, like, you know, we can just move in that direction, I guess we just move over there, right? But the problem is, if we are like, if we are this box moving along a decline and we move over to the right, we actually don't want to move over to the right. We want to like move down, right? So we need a little bit more than just doing it. So we need to know if we're standing on ground and not falling / slipping. So that's going to be something we need to know. So why don't we just break this up? Information we need to know about our current state. So we need to acquire the actual physics boxes that we're going to be colliding against the world. We need to know if we're standing on ground and not falling or slipping, and we need to know our direction and velocity. Says if we're on the ground here, we actually want to like do a sweep test kind of against like that. So let's take some of our situations. We are on flat ground and we do a sweep test. So why don't we just so like do this in steps. Let's break this up. If we are currently falling / moving in the air, or if we are on the ground. I'm not super expert on like, you know, doing 2D movement and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna call this physics notes programming. Because I haven't actually written like that many platformers. I was more like working on brawlers and, you know, other games where I was doing servers and all that stuff. So, you know, it's been since probably college where I was working on like platformer stuff, so I just need to go through this in my head and get all my thoughts straight before I start crunching on the work. Because actually writing, it's not going to be too much. I just need to know what I'm writing is actually not just garbage. So let's do the if we're on the ground. So we do a sweep test in the direction of our step. We start with the basic case, and we want to move along the ground. So basically, if we're on flat ground, a normal to the surface is going to be like in this direction. So we want to move 90 degrees, and we want to move along the surface. Yeah, I've already got all the collision code in there. Like I've got these physics utils already set up with all my collision layers. Thank you TransMM for following. Like I've got my physics utils right here with all my different trace channels for all the things, and I've got like ray trace in a direction, sweep sphere, sweep box, sweep capsule. I've got all these things, so I'm just kind of organizing my thoughts here for all the things. So if we're on the ground, we want to move kind of along the ground. So information we need. If we are on the ground, info we need. We need the normal to the surface. And with that, we need the direction vector for moving along that surface. There are other ways to do this, and we'll explore them. So we're going to do a sweep test in our direction. So if this test is successful, if this test has no collisions, we move to the new location. But let's see if so that'd be like the super naive thing. But let's say we're moving along the, like we got this sort of ground. So our normal is here. And we're moving this direction. We would move down, so we'd end up like right here. So that would work. But if our ground was kind of like this, and we were right here moving along it, we've got the normal to the ground, we would end up kind of like in the air a little bit. So what we actually kind of want to do is place ourselves on the ground. So the question is, how do we we could like move ourselves out. There's other ways than just moving normal. We could just be like, okay, let's move our character in this direction, and then like draw a ray down and like see if we can move down to place ourselves on the ground, and based on how far we're moving, we can move farther down. And of course the issue with that is we might move farther on a slope like this direction based on like how far we can move down. We could move farther on the slope than we could normally move just like straight up and down, because we're moving at like a diagonal angle. And this would be a lot easier if we had like a height map and we're moving along a height map, because we don't have to worry about all sorts of different things. And we can also kind of be a little expensive with the player moving. We could do quite a few little raycasts to figure that out. Alright, so if we're on the ground, I'm thinking we do kind of maybe a hybrid approach. Oops. So if we're because we're not going to really have too many. I don't think we're actually going to have slopes that kind of look like this that are all nice and smooth, at least not in collision land. We won't. In art land, obviously we will. So what we'll do is we'll get the normal to the surface we're on. We are then going to sweep our object, but of course, like, if we were moving we want to move this guy down here, like we're gonna not be able to sweep. Because as you can clearly see, this bottom thing's gonna clip through the ground. But, well, it shouldn't, because our character shouldn't be like that. It should look like this. So him moving over here. Alright, so sweep test in the direction. So if we are on the ground and we press right, we're moving along it. So we do a sweep test in our direction, which is the normal rotated into our direction. Movement. If there's no test, we move to that new location. Check if, and then we do kind of like that hybrid approach where we'll do this movement, but then we're gonna cast down and see how far we can move. Cast array downwards and move to the ground if it's close enough for us to snap to it. So how is that going to do in some more complicated situations? So if we are moving down a slope, and let's say there's a wall at the end of it, our dude moves down and he's going to run into the wall. So he's not going to be able to move. Yeah, we should. So if there's nothing there, then we do like this sort of thing. So if there is a collision, we're basically going to want to move. How are we actually going to want to move? Like, and we can basically sweep our guy into like the closest point there that the sweep allows, and then we try to put him on the ground, kind of settle him down. Go as far as possible along the direction of motion. Then move to be on solid ground. Oh well, we're doing a sweep test, and that should cover us moving, you know, and like if there's a platform here or something like that, like, you know, our sweep test is going to hit the platform and we're going to move, you know, drawing sucks, but we'll move right there into the platform and then settle ourselves on the ground. And if we're moving along the direction of motion, what should happen, like if there's a platform here that we can go under, since we're moving, you know, normal to it, we will actually, you know, run under the platform properly, as opposed to like if we were moving, you know, just flat to the right, we might actually run into the platform and then be like, okay, then now we need to, because if we're just moving straight, we're actually going to kind of move our dude off the ground and then have to like move him down, and like that'd be all screwed up. So we do need to move normal to our, you know, our normal rotated. We need to move that direction. Okay, so I think that'll work for like running into walls. Let's see, how would this look if we had stairs? So if we have stairs, our motion, our normal is going to be just like, you know, like this, and you know, Bitey's going to have like his foot off in the air. So we're actually going to move off to the right. And then when we drop ourselves down, we're going to be dropping ourselves down onto this like next platform. So the question is, where do we want to like actually drop ourselves down properly? Because if we yeah, so this is if we're casting array, so we can snap to the ground. Let's just do like a when snapping to the ground. We need to know exactly where we need to do this, because if our dude is, you know, he's like, he starts here, and when we move him to snap to the ground, if we draw the ray from the bottom here, that's where we're going to go. But if our guy is like off and he moved from this step, and in one frame he's over here, and we need to like drop him down here, that might be a little too far, and we might like start skipping steps as we run down a hill, right? Because if we were just a little bit back, maybe the distance for me to settle is here. Because if we cast array down to snap to that ground, we still would have to do another sweep test down. So I guess we cast it from the middle, and then we do a sweep test, and then we move him to where that sweep test, yeah, so we're not just casting array, we're doing a sweep test to the ground. Okay, so we're not casting array, it's do another sweep test. And that should actually catch this staircase where we'll actually jump down there properly. And we need to take into account our velocity and frame time for snapping distance for running down things. Of course, there's another issue here, is like, what if we have a frame that has a huge amount of time? Like if our frame rate dips because reasons, and our guy runs off into, you know, nowhere land, so he's like hovering over here because we're moving normal to the thing, and he needs to like snap downwards a fair distance. So what we're gonna need to do is we're actually gonna need to move him in steps, and like frame steps, because like, let's say you've got a big staircase here, and there's like your guy's maybe like this big, there's like a platform right here, and normally you just kind of run right under it, but because you lagged so bad, your guy actually like moves over here and then like somehow ends up on top of the platform when he moves, which is total bullshit. So we're gonna have to make sure that we are moving our characters in like regular fashion. So for all motion, we need to move by a constant step count. So like X number of milliseconds. And then of course we're going to do the hybrid thing where we move X number of milliseconds and then plus leftover for the current frame. So if we're moving in 5 millisecond steps for physics, and we have a 17 millisecond frame, you know, 17 milliseconds equals, so 3 5 millisecond motions, then a 2 millisecond motion. And that should keep it smooth and also keep it pretty consistent, so variable frame rate's not going to cause us to jump like a potato. Because that's some things in like old school games, like you would like jump, and if your frame rate was correct, you'd be able to like jump up on that platform. But if your frame rate sucked, you'd kind of go. Maybe I should use the straight lines for this. But you kind of go like there, and then there, and then you'd hit the platform. So you'd like do the same jump, but because your frame rate was lower, you wouldn't be able to jump high enough to get onto a platform. People would be like, well, on my machine I can always, you know, jump my dude into that little secret place, and on your machine you can't because you're a scrub and don't have very good hardware. Okay, so that'll be our motion for moving along the ground. It looks like we'll be doing sweep tests and sweeping to the normal of the ground, rotated towards our motion. So, you know, it's either going to be, our normal is like this, and we're moving to the right, we're going to rotate, you know, this vector this way, 90 degrees. Otherwise, we're moving to the left, we rotate like that. And that's how we get our direction of motion. So if we are on the ground, so if we are falling, and we want to move. So we are not on the ground, so we are falling. We need to add gravity to our velocity each frame. We are going to sweep. Looks like we're just gonna, you know, if we're going this way, we're just gonna sweep our character in that direction. So if we, so do a sweep test in the direction of motion, and if no hit, go ahead and move to that location. Okay, so if there's no hit, we're good. So let's say we sweep and we actually, like, our vector is big, like going here. So what we're going to want to do is actually move our character to this position, right? And the question is, what happens to the rest of our motion? Like, if do we just stop when we hit the ground? So if there's a hit, do we just stop? Maybe we had some extra frame time that we could have moved, and like we're running and jumping and moving very quickly because we're Dashkin. You know, we're bitey. We're supposed to be able to run and jump. I don't think we want to. I think we need to be able to land and like use the rest of our motion kind of in the direction that we're running. So like we need to zero out our vertical movement and get our horizontal movement going on. So we need to like land. So we need to be on the ground and still moving. So if there's a hit, we need to know if we can actually land on the surface. So if there's a hit, if we can land on this surface, so we need to know the normal of the surface, and if the normal of the surface is like, you know, something that you could presumably land on. So we're gonna need rules for what surfaces you can actually land upon. So if we can land on this surface, we need to move to the location of impact, then move the rest of the frame time as if we were on the ground. Oh, I guess that's another thing down here for if we are already on the ground and we move off the ground. So we should have another thing down here. If we cannot snap to the ground, then we set ourselves to be in the air. Which kind of makes me think, like, if you set yourself to in the air, you don't want to actually move normal to... Well, we do want to move normal to the surface, because if we ran off a cliff, and the cliff was on a downslope and we're running down, we should actually have momentum to move down. We don't just like jump off on a flat 90. And if we ran off the cliff and the cliff is flat, we're just going to go straight. So I don't think there's going to be a problem with that transition. But okay, so we move with the rest of the frame time on the ground just fine. So, and that should just work. That shouldn't be an issue. So if we cannot land, so we're moving into the ground. On a steep slope, and we hit. So we're gonna move to this location, and what do? We're not able to land on this, but we're colliding with it. So we're kind of sliding, so we're not gonna have any more vertical movement, but we're gonna, I guess what we'll need to do is, because we'll be sliding, we'll be applying a velocity. Yeah, so when we are in the air, well, we won't be in the air. We're on the ground, but we're sliding. So we need like a sliding state. So when we are sliding, let's see, we cannot. This is going to depend. So, to make sure our sliding velocity is not greater, our sliding controllable velocity is not greater than our sliding. I guess maybe we don't really have to do too much to see if we're sliding or not. We don't have to have too many rules. We can basically just be like, well, how much can Bitey control himself in the air? You know, if he's not on the ground. And since we're on the ground and we're sliding, we're gonna add a velocity for gravity. And if you're sliding, gravity should pull you. Like your acceleration would actually be, we would take the normal to the surface, and if it was to the left like this, we basically would add gravity in this direction. So you get pulled down. So if you could somehow run upwards, so maybe we just set him as being on the ground regardless of what's going on, and we just kind of have this gravitational force that's always pulling you based on the normal to the surface. And if your velocity gets negative, we could control your direction based on where your input is going, and kind of control, so Bitey would be like looking to the right, but he would be moving down at this direction. So he'd be like running up a hill, and he's just sliding back down. That would actually look pretty good. So sliding is actually on the ground. So if we are on the ground, we need to check our surface normal. If it is too great, then we need to apply gravity to our velocity based on the normal direction. And we can kind of have a sliding check there to see like if you're moving in the right direction and doing all the things. So we can always land on the ground, is what it seems like. But that's of course not accurate, because if we've got like some big, we've got a shear drop. If we had any sort of angle to this drop, I kind of want to handle it as if we're sliding along it. And if we were doing like wall jumping, like Metroid or Mega Man, these things, I think the surface is going to be, if we're moving in this direction and we impact this thing, and our surface normal is basically, within a certain tolerance of this, we're just going to call it a wall. So, okay, if we can land on the surface, that is true. There are things that we cannot land on. This is basically the surface normal is close enough to level. Cannot land. So otherwise, how are we going to do this? Because we kind of want to stick to, we probably want to be able to stick to a wall for a certain amount of time so you can jump off of it. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to do that? Well, we can basically zero out our horizontal movement. So we're not going to be like moving to the left or to the right anymore. And we'll start sliding down, and we want to, I guess, apply friction to our velocity in the vertical direction. And how are we going to know we're actually stuck to the wall? We need to set ourselves as being stuck to the surface wall. So we actually have a third state. If we are currently stuck to a wall, we have another whole section of physics to do. So we'll set ourselves as being stuck to the surface of the wall, and then we run the rest of the frame time based on that physics. So we'll transition to being stuck on the wall. So bam, you're stuck on the wall. So we are going to now do wall stuff. So you have a wall, you are stuck to this wall, and you have no left or right motion. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to like move you down. So we do have motion in like the Z direction here. So Z is down. So if we're stuck to the wall, we need to apply gravity . And we're still going to be moving along the normal to the wall. So like if the wall is really close, we're going to want to slide down it. Like, I guess another example would be if the wall is kind of like this and we wanted to stick along it, we could do that. So we're going to need to apply gravity. I guess if this, if it was like this, we would just fall the hell right off of it. So we should just apply gravity straight down. And we want to move our character, we need to apply gravity straight down. This needs to take into account some sort of friction. So we'll be like slowing our character down, so gravity will be applied, but we'll be applying kind of a global friction. So if you hit this wall really fast, you're going to be able to slide maybe up while gravity's pulling you down, but that friction's going to be slowing you down at the same time the gravity is. So if you like hit the wall and are sliding down because you were coming from like way up and hit the wall, you're going to be going down pretty quick, but then you're going to slow down. So if we're currently stuck to the wall, we're going to need to move our character in the direction of the surface and our velocity. And then we need to snap back to the wall, I guess. So in this location, if we zeroed out our, I guess maybe are we zeroing out our left and right velocity? Because if we do, no matter how hard we hit this wall that was like sloping, we're gonna stop and fall off, which sucks. So we do not want to zero out our horizontal movement. We're going to keep our horizontal velocity. We're going to zero out our horizontal movement, but keep our horizontal velocity. So our velocity is basically saying we slammed into this really hard, but we want to move along it. So if we're moving along the normal to this thing, but we're applying gravity, gravity is applied straight down. So we're going to try to move along the normal based on our velocity. No. We're going to need to do both? Like we both need to move. Well, we need to apply, yeah, our, maybe gravity is kind of a, in this situation, a special case because it's going to be pulling us off of the wall. Alright, so our surface and our velocity, our gravity can never actually add to our velocity in any direction but straight down. So gravity will not do that. So we're going to be adding to our velocity in the negative direction. And our current velocity will, like in horizontal terms, go to zero very quickly because of the friction. But we're going to move normal to the surface based on our velocity? Or do we just not? We'll move normal to the surface based on our horizontal velocity. So the question is kind of, do we take ourselves off the wall and to drop ourselves down and then try to re-stick ourselves to the wall? Or do we move along the wall itself? I guess we have to check if we get pulled off the wall just by gravity, kind of, if our Because even in the case of like a super flat wall, if we're moving down, we're going to have to re-stick ourselves to the wall just to make sure we're still there. So we do need like a kind of a sticky sort of thing going on. Do we keep gravity as a separate velocity? I don't really like that idea. So I think the basic thing is we're going to want to keep adding to our velocity, and if our horizontal velocity goes to zero, then we just go straight down regardless of anything. Okay, so we need an if here, basically, like if our horizontal velocity is too low, we move straight down regardless of what we're doing. Otherwise, we move our character in the direction of the surface and our velocity. So if we move straight down, let's just do otherwise. Move our character straight down. So we move our character. So we do our sweep test, and we can move. So then we do our sweep test. So if no collision, alright, well we move to the distance of hit. Well, let's just be naive on it. So no collision, move to the new location. and then we need to stick ourselves to the wall. So in this case, we would shoot a ray. We would do a sweep test in the opposite direction of the normal. So the normal of the wall that we were stuck to is this direction. We're actually going to do a sweep test back to stick ourselves to the wall with a certain number. So we will do that. So if like we fell off, we wouldn't move ourselves to the right. We just now be falling. And that should work just fine. Okay, so no collision, move to new location, sweep test in inverse of surface normal, move to wall if quote unquote close enough. Sounds about right. Alright, so if there is a collision, so in what case will we have a collision? So there's a couple cases, like we're here and we're moving down a wall like this and we hit ground basically with one of our sweep test legs. Basically it sounds like we need to do the same sort of thing as if we can land on the surface, then we land. And there are other things. Let's say there's like a little lip there. Well, yeah, we just land on it. And we've got the case here where we fall off a ledge and now we're in the air. So maybe we should explicitly call that out. If no location sweep test, if we are close enough. So if not close enough, we go to being in the air. There's an issue there where if we kind of like we're on the edge of a wall here, like this is our wall and we are right at the edge of it. Let's say, you know, just like half of our body is sticking off. In this frame we kind of slide down to here or whatever, and now we're in the air, but we slid a little farther than we probably could have, because for this entire frame time here for the sweep test, it's got you so that you're in the air. I mean, on the wall, so theoretically you would have started to have been, you know, flying. A little bit, you know, shorter. We would have been flying sooner than we actually simulated. But I think if our step is small enough, like, you know, we only simulate for a certain number of milliseconds, it shouldn't be an issue. So if we're on a wall and we hit a platform, we just move to it, and that's fine. We just move to that thing. Alright, so what if we're on a wall and there is a steep slope? Well, we're going to move to the point of collision, which is like right here. And since now we are on the ground, we have landed, you know, we're not stuck to a wall. We're now going to have, you know, that gravity effect going surface, you know, perpendicular to the normal in the direction of the slope, and our character will start sliding immediately, and we're gonna simulate to so there is a collision here. So we do collide, move to point of collision, and we're now on the ground, and we simulate as though we're on the ground for the rest of the frame time. So that should get us so we can be stuck on the wall and do all the things. Should be able to fall off of the wall. We should be able to move and get on a slope and then fall down that slope. We should be able to stay stuck to the wall. We should slow down. And if we hit a wall and it was kind of a, like, let's say we jumped upwards, like this is a wall, this is a floor, and we jumped and we hit the side of the wall real quick. What's going to happen is it's going to slow us down, but we're not going to immediately zero out our horizontal motion. So if we're still continuing up, the next frame we're going to actually move up to the surface normal, and we might be in the air. And then since we're now in the air, then we're going to start moving to the right because we haven't zeroed out our velocity. But there is an issue there where if you kind of stub your toe on a wall, there's going to be a frame there where a physics step where you move up instead of up and to the right. So there's a question there about if we should have another check, like we hit the wall and we simulated being stuck to the wall, and maybe we're on that edge and we still, like in a nice platformer, right? If your guy like barely makes it onto that wall or something, you know, and he just stubs his toe, he's just like whatever and just keeps going up on top of the wall, you know. So the question would be, if our physics box, should we be shooting to figure out if we're actually stuck on a wall? Should we have a little bit more logic to it? Like, if we do our sweep test when we're in the air, and our sweep test is saying, you know, that we hit, should we actually go check some of the other things? Should we check the other corners and see, like, maybe if we can get around this little, you know, this little toe here? Because that's going to be kind of a crappy game experience if we're stubbing our toe on all the freaking platforms, right? It's just going to, you'd like your guy to kind of ease up and just get on the platform very smoothly anyway. So it sounds like we should be doing a little bit like that. We might want to take into account, or if like we're going to stop ourselves and we're stuck to the wall, and then we want to unstick ourselves very quickly. So we want to run some tests in order to do that. So we're going to apply gravity straight down based on the frame step time. We might not want to do this. The first check might be, do we have horizontal velocity? Yeah, or yeah, positive vertical. So do we have positive vertical or horizontal, or any horizontal velocity? Because if we have that, so we're going to do yes, no. And if no, we're going to do all of this crap. If yes, we're going to want to try to ease around a corner, aren't we? So how do we ease around the corner? Do we try to move ourselves without applying gravity? I guess we need like we need to know if this is the first physics step in a, because we only want to apply gravity once for the frame, for the step. Well, not quite, because we're stepping through this, so we do need to apply gravity because we haven't applied it yet. So yes, we will apply gravity regardless. So if yes, we apply gravity straight down. But if we're mantling, we're actually getting up here. We might not want to do this. So What's gonna be our check to see if